Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Disgruntled. It's so good to have you here this Thursday. Today, we're going to switch it up, right? The last few weeks, we've had some serious talks, and we've had some gears were ground. We've had some serious go-arounds. We're going to lighten it up a little bit today with what is exciting to me is our one last chat. And it's my turn to pick. But first, before we do, let's bring in Jason. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm super excited because it's my turn. It's my turn to pick. And just so you guys know, Jason has no idea. And for the last 3 days, he's been pinging me about who it is we're talking about today. And so if you've never seen one of these before, here's how it goes. One of us picks a person from history. And if this person were to walk in a room and sit down across from you and you had the opportunity to have one last conversation with them and they were going to disappear forever, whether they are currently dead or alive, but you have the opportunity for one last talk, what would you say? And who would it be? And so it's my turn. Before I reveal who it is, Jason,
Okay.
let me ask you this.
Yep.
Does the name Philip Johnson mean anything to you?
No.
I didn't think so because it didn't mean anything to me. But
Okay.
he played an integral part in this.
Okay.
And I'll explain that in a few minutes. But if you had the opportunity, my friend,
Okay.
to sit down and have one last chat with one or all of these people, and these people being the Navajo code talkers, what would you ask them? Yes. I love the look of thought.
That's crazy.
Why?
Well, I mean, I haven't watched that movie
With
in
Nicolas Cage?
15 years. Was it Nick Cage? Then
The Wind Talkers movie?
yeah. And then the one guy from Shooter, who was the FBI agent.
Yep.
Dude, that's a great movie. I've read a book or two about this, but it's been on the technician side. I can't believe this is happening, but I'm stumped. I'm having a hard time
Okay.
because there's so many different things to ask, right?
There's a lot to ask. Yes.
You know, how did you do what you did, dragging 75 tons of testicle behind you doing this? Like, that's number one, right?
Yes.
You know, because I mean, the Enigma had $1 million bounty on it, but these code speakers were human beings that could be hunted and found. And so you were in a position that nobody else on the battlefield was in. Not only were you the keeper of all information, but you were a more sought-after target than a star because you shut the whole thing down. So what would that conversation be?
Exactly.
Well, since you've had so much time to think about it, and I need to buy myself some time, what about you?
Well, I'm going to tell you what, man. Here's how I came to this idea. My grandmother and her husband, not my grandfather, I guess he's my step-grandpa, I guess, are buried in a military cemetery in Arizona. It's relatively new. It's like 3 years old or something like that.
Okay.
But it is a place where they are, any of the families that are going to agree are being moved to this cemetery. And so I had a lot of interest in it when I found that out. Also, I come from a Native American background, and so when I had learned about these Navajo code talkers, I always have been interested. But the fact of the matter is that these guys would have lost the Pacific had it not been for the code talkers. The Marine Corps would have lost the Pacific. Iwo Jima was won based on the codes and the messages sent back and forth. This is no secret. Those of them that are left, which I think is like one or two, maybe, they tell the story all the time, especially those of them that were there. And so I guess my first question to them would be, how did it feel knowing that your efforts won the Pacific, right? Like after it was all said and done, and furthermore, it was kept silent, right? This was never acknowledged till like 1968.
Yeah.
Because they used the codes all the way through Vietnam. And they were never publicly recognized till like 2001 or 2001, 2002. George W. was the first president to publicly recognize this group of people. And so, first of all, how did you keep your mouth shut, knowing that you and these super large testicles that you drag around, without you and your nuts, we would have lost the war.
Right.
We wouldn't have even won. I don't know that we would have even had a chance on Iwo Jima.
Well, it certainly would have been different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, this is a crazy one. Because it's not one I don't think I'm speaking only for myself, but I don't know about you guys out there. I would have never thought about this. And so kind of being forced into thinking about it, carrying around that secret for 30 years?
Yeah.
30 plus years. Knowing the things that you knew that you did, the places that you were attached to the hip with those RTOs, the things that you saw.
Yeah, dude.
The people that were protecting you. To carry that around. I mean, I'm not going to lie.
And some of them didn't even want them there.
And some of them tried to go naked. No help.
Yeah. They were, and so like this is a true testament to the resilience of the Native American people.
100%.
I mean, they went into this situation, man, knowing that they're carrying the weight of the war on their shoulders.
Right.
The people that were there exclusively to keep them alive, because without them, the code is gone.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that know it. In fact, there was a story of a Navajo American officer who was a Navajo but wasn't trained in the code, who was taken captive, was held for many years before it was discovered that he was Navajo. And then they tortured him until he would decipher these messages. And he spoke the language. He still couldn't decipher the message. Didn't know. Wasn't trained in the code. So he was listening to the messages, and they were like cat, sick horse, fly, 6'2" bear. And
right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because you can decipher the words, you still had to have the code.
Right.
Dude. Well, to your point, you already had the European front. Now you're pushing out in the Pacific. And so, not to say that you're not with the best of the best, but like the whole thing had kind of already occurred in Europe. So now you're going into a whole, like the second generation.
Yeah.
And you're going into that thing, knowing everything that you knew about the European theater. Now you're going into the Pacific theater. This is insane. You imagine the stories that they couldn't tell when they got home? The ones that they couldn't share with anybody, that they could never get off their chest?
That they died with.
That they died with is right.
And so if any of you haven't, and you're watching this today, go back and watch the video that came out yesterday. I put out a video yesterday talking about the power of the story and why it's important that we hear the story of veterans in this country. And this is exactly why. These men did, if we want to talk about military heroes, these guys. Like, these guys are the Avengers.
Right. Yeah, this is the super group.
Yeah.
This was everything.
I mean, we could talk about all the special operations groups and
All
this
important.
and that, which they're all great soldiers.
Yeah.
But these dudes, these were just another example, again, of just the regular guy soldier, Marines.
Right.
And their contribution was that they spoke a language that wasn't written. It wasn't in any book. It wasn't able to be researched. That's it. They've been speaking it since they knew how to talk.
Yeah.
It was given to them at birth. And then they went, yeah, I'll go to the Pacific Theater. No big deal. All I gotta do is talk in this microphone
Right.
and say bear, cat, 5, 6 flies. That's it. But what they probably didn't account for was the mortars and the bullets and the death and the destruction
Right.
and watching their brothers die.
I do have my first question.
Okay, great.
How much was your signing bonus?
Probably nothing.
0. I mean, that's what, and we've talked about it before, that selfless service. To think about these Native Americans who, really up to that point, kind of given the short end of the stick in many ways. There weren't a lot of opportunities on reservations, from what I know. I mean, there weren't great economic booms that were happening. Certainly a resilient people that didn't mingle outside of their own community at that time, like not often. Or if they did, then they were just not part of their community anymore. Right. So they were isolated. And to be isolated and kind of in your own, for those of you who don't know, in Minnesota we've got a lot of reservations. They're on their own quote unquote native soil. And I don't really know the legality of that, so nobody jumped down my throat. But I'm fairly certain when you have your own police force, there is a federal law that oversees most of us, but they're allowed kind of their own rules, their own actions. But to be in that place and basically, let's say it, being shit on.
Yeah.
Still signing up to come and do something, knowing that if you can't do it, because there was a genius out there that figured this stuff out, right? That would be my another question. Like, where did you train? Because I assume it wasn't just some regular army unit that was just like, hey, I got this great idea about these Navajo, speakers.
I'm glad that you bring that up.
Because I would like to know that.
Because they were Marines. And this is why I asked you about Philip Johnson.
Okay.
Philip Johnson was a Marine Corps officer, to the best of my understanding.
Okay.
He was the son of missionaries who lived on a reservation his whole life with Navajo people.
Okay.
So he knew the language, was taught the language as a small child, his whole life till he joined the military. And he simply saw a goddamn article in the newspaper. There was an article in the newspaper, apparently, that said, hey, we're looking for a different way to trick the Japanese. I mean, for lack of better words, but there was a newspaper article.
I was going to say, I don't think it was Japanese that they said. I've read a lot of newspapers from back then.
Well, they were looking for codes, new codes.
Yeah.
So that they could trick the enemy. Whether it was the Japanese, the Germans, the Italians, the Mexicans, who knows? Who cares?
But just saying, because it was always, remember, the Marines defeat the Japs. That was always the line. I remember reading that in many of the papers I have in my garage. That's all I was alluding to. I was just making a Japs joke.
Oh, roger that.
Sorry, I sent him down a wrong path. And I want to be very forthcoming. I did not know what he's talking about right now. So when he dropped that guy's name in the beginning, I had no clue that we were actually going to get to his
until 2 weeks ago.
Because now we're just back to another regular guy situation.
Exactly.
So, and I digress. Sorry.
Well, but this is the whole point, right? That's what I was getting to. Just another regular guy situation. This guy's sitting in the chow hall or somewhere drinking his coffee, reading the paper in the morning. Sees an article that says, hey, we're looking for a new way to confuse the enemy in our messages. And this dude who grew up on a reservation, the son of missionaries working with Navajo people his whole life, goes, well, hey, the Navajo folks have an unwritten, unspoken anywhere else in the world language. Let's try that. Boom, code talkers.
That's insane.
And they win the war. Or not the war, but they win the Pacific. Based on the efforts of these men.
Right.
And this dude, and so here's the point. I'm sorry to cut you off, but here's the point.
I don't have anything.
Philip Johnston should certainly be recognized a lot more than he is. Because that was a genius idea.
Oh, there needs to be a Fort Johnson.
It's crazy to me that nobody's ever heard his name.
Right? No, that should be on the pantheon with the Pattons, Omar Bradleys, Schwarzkopfs.
And just the story of how the code talkers came to be.
Right.
Someone saw a newspaper article.
It's like the ultimate or origin story.
Yeah.
It just came out over just grabbing breakfast at the DFAC.
Crazy, right?
Dude, that's nuts.
Man.
It's so, and I mean, we had the luxury of Blue Forest trackers and every other type of technical advantage we could when it came to communications, right? With jumpers and everything else. But even there, to have people that spoke a language that was unknown anywhere else on planet Earth, and I have to assume similarly that it was probably tribal too. And not just speaking pure Navajo on a whole, but area by area, because those people were moved in spots. And so even the difference between if there were 4 or 5, 10 or 20.
You mean like different dialects?
Like different dialects, like the Northern German versus Bavarian German and those things. So even if you were to get your hands on, because everybody's pretty crafty, one of the people that did speak Navajo, you maybe didn't even get the right dialect or breakdown, or there would be changes. Yeah. And then you would have to know the code. Well,
that's a good point. And I don't know if that was ever really a thing. It very well could have been. The area in which they lived is quite small. It's like a corner of Utah and Arizona and part of Colorado or something like that. Very small. Okay. But it certainly could have been. Back then, who knows where they...
Right. Purely speculative.
But the other thing that I would want to ask these guys is why? In a time in our country when being a brown person, not just a black person, but a brown-skinned person, was not fashionable, let's say. They joined, and I don't know, man, I just think that there's something about this idea that even when they weren't the most popular kid on the block, let's say, they were like, well, whatever, man, let's help. Let's do it.
Everybody for the flag.
Right. And the one common goal of everybody that put that uniform on was the same goal that you and I shared when we decided to sign up. And then go off to training, and you get mixed in with the guys that are supposed to keep you alive at all costs, because these men were the enigma, right?
Right.
And still powered through and did what they had to do and fought their balls off. They weren't just sending codes back. I mean, that was their main duty. But these dudes were in the trenches fighting.
Yeah, they were fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, it's not, they weren't hidden. They weren't in a glass bubble. They weren't protected. And, kind of doubling down on what you said too. They were kind of like the forgotten Americans, like the stepchildren of America. They they didn't have everything that your white American had an opportunity for. I'm not making this a white and black thing,
Well, no,
but the reality was back then there were even more difficulties navigating the regular world than there is right now. I mean, right now we talk about everybody's a victim, but back then there were haves and have-nots, right? You know, you had situations where they couldn't do anything, but the fact that even then, at what I would perceive, and maybe there was a lower point, but there wouldn't have been much lower of a point, they still signed up to put on the uniform, to make the sacrifice for the red, white, and blue. And that, I mean, if anybody out there is going to take a lesson from this conversation, it's to think at that low, for all the whining, bitching, and complaining we have right now today, for them to stand up and do something that was absolutely above and beyond what anybody could be asked to wear a uniform, for a country that wasn't even appreciating you back home. That is something that we need to look at and honor each and every day.
Absolutely. And you know what, bro? I did a lot of, in the last few days, because I've been so hyped about this conversation, I've been doing a little bit of like watching. I mean, these guys are all super old. But there's no shortage of footage of them talking about their experience. I mean, they didn't get into great detail, but some of them get pretty strong, pretty graphic about their experience. And most of them, in every message, most of them talk about, we had one common goal, everybody that was there. We wanted to win the war for America. All we have to do is work as a team and be together and stay true to the values that we were taught, that brought us together in the first place, in this uniform under this flag.
Yeah.
And this coming from men who weren't even wanted on their own land.
Yeah, not afforded the same opportunity as their counterparts.
It's absolutely crazy to me, dude. Yeah. That, man, and no. Furthermore, I don't know how long the conversation would last. I'm sure that it would just go on and on and on. Because as you talk, of course, you have more questions and you just want to know more stuff.
Right.
But damn, dude. I'd like to buy you a beer. I'd like to pack you a bowl if you participate in that.
Right.
The peace pipe, whatever it is. Right. And so I think that it's important to recognize that these types of things are not something that we talk about all the time. We need to take time out of our days to recognize that this type of thing needs to be talked about more. Mr. Johnston, of course, should be talked about more, should be remembered, but it has to be something that is brought up outside of just the most what's a good term? Not the most, the least watched podcast on all of YouTube.
Right.
I mean, these are things that need to be talked about at all kinds of different levels, because this is what shaped our country. This is what made us and makes us who we are today, or at least what we strive to be. Our country has changed so much, it's so polarized now. But maybe we can get back there someday. Maybe. I hope so. I mean,
dude, I'm kind of irritated.
Uh-oh.
If you would have told me this 3 days ago, I would have hopped on the Tubi and done some research, because I think that would be that you have so much, you're so much greater informed on this. Like mine is just a couple of, and I wish I could remember the book, but I know when I read the book, they really talked about their history more than the service. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of like how the vocabulary actually maintained and how many times it had almost gone extinct.
Oh,
where it almost died off completely, and it was, just one person that knew it or a handful of people, and it focused a lot on that. And then, of course, the movie, which I think was a passing frenzy. I'm pretty sure I bought it when it was $5 at Walmart, and because I didn't go to movies or anything, but it was one of those great movies that stuck out, even watching it that one time, because the story was better than the movie. And I'm assuming there's other books, but in hearing, if there is that opportunity, and maybe we can get something where if we can find a good video and get that link to the bottom of this, so people have a greater understanding. Because I'm sure there's people out there, we all do, just like me. Like, I have very little information, but being able to click on something else that would at least show or have one person's story, or maybe if there is somebody out there who knows somebody, to reach out to us, to get us where we get the opportunity to have contact with them and go have that conversation.
Absolutely.
I mean, where we are, we just don't have, we've got Sioux and some other tribes around here.
But we will travel, especially to Arizona or somewhere warm. We will travel to have this conversation.
Oh my goodness, 100%. Can you imagine? See, and that would be that. Like, maybe this is one of those things when we're talking about like capturing these stories. When we talk about One Last Chat, maybe what we should work on is having that chat. Of course, it's not going to happen for, the posthumous ones that we do.
But,
But in instances like this, I mean, you want to talk about creating something and getting something going, because if there's a politician out there that's looking for that thing to hang your hat on when it comes to recognizing the unsung heroes of the military, we've far too often focus on the headlines, and we don't realize the important people that were even more integral than they would ever give themselves credit for.
Yeah.
Doing unique things at unique times in unique places. And this is, to date, because I don't know, I'm assuming you're going to find even more crazy. Now you've raised the bar where I have to go look and go really dirty to find this. But for somebody to go out and recognize these people, we have an opportunity. It's great what Bush did. But at the same time, we're removing names from military installations, historical people, historical parts of our existence. Maybe they could take the time to add one of these to it, rather than continually reduce and remove. Start adding something. They get the helicopters.
Yeah. If you're going, I agree, dude. If we're going to start taking names off of military installations and monuments, because in 1802, their great-grandfather may have been a slave owner 250 years ago, then why don't we, how come Mr. Johnston doesn't get, why don't we name a chow hall after him, or a running track, or a base, or something? Right. I mean, what are we going to name it? BLM Chow Hall? I mean, it's just stupid. That's a whole nother conversation. This is supposed to be a fun show,
dude. It's super interesting. I wish I had more.
Well, let me tell you something.
Oh.
I in no way intended on frustrating you with this, but I think that this is good, right?
100%.
I did not want to try to make you look unintelligent or anything like that.
No, I do a pretty good job of that. Don't worry.
But here's why this is positive, bro, is because this is going to get you to look, right? Because now you're going to be intrigued. So the hope is that anybody that watches this that goes, oh, the code talkers, they're going to look.
Yep.
Which is going to just further their reach. It's going to further their legacy. That's what this is all about.
Right.
And so trust me, folks, when I tell you that it is not beyond Jason here to throw a doozy at me the next time around.
Oh, it's coming hard.
And I'll be stuttering, like I just had sour candy.
Which likely you did.
Which likely I did.
No, dude, that is, yeah.
But this is a good example of why I think we should be doing these things. This platform, 3 Clicks Media as a whole, Disgruntled, and anything else that comes on the channel is all about awareness. Just talk about it. Read it, watch it, but talk about it. Have it in your mind, because that's how these legacies stay in place forever. And they're important. They're important to learn how we got to where we're at and to stay here and not succumb to all the bullshit that's happening in this country. The way that they want us to change and the way that they want us to do this, that, and the other thing, and get further away from the values that send people like these code talkers into a recruiting station and say, okay, I'll do it. And then take the weight of the war, not the world, but the weight of the war, which maybe was the weight of the world, on their shoulders. And they fought their balls off, and they watched men die to protect them over and over and over again, and then pick up that microphone and send the next message. Because that was their job. And if they weren't going to do it, the whole thing was for nothing. These are the types of people that we need in places of leadership in this country, not just the president, not just Congress, not just the Senate. How about our school boards? How about our mayors? How about how about anywhere in leadership in any place? People with integrity, with the testicular fortitude to say, hey, wait a minute. This isn't right. We're going to do it the right way. And just for clarity, women can display testicular fortitude also. It's just a frame of mind. Before I get canceled for that. Who knows, maybe that's coming too. Anyway, we've about run out of time here. We do have a couple minutes left for the best part of the show. Jason, you have the floor, solo on the screen. Give us your final thoughts.
I didn't have a first thought, so I don't know how I'm going to have a final thought. I really don't, other than I'm just going to beat you on the next one. I'm going to go further. I'm going to go deeper. I'm going to go darker. But I guess the one piece would be to think about just getting back in time. And again, if this is the first time, the third time, or the 5,000th time that you've ever thought about a wind talker, go back. Try to put yourself in that position to think about that. These are people that were truly divided when we live in a world that isn't really so divided, but they tell us we are. And they were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, if needed, to go serve the red, white, and blue. Now we have a situation where, myself included, because I've said it before, it would pose a challenge for me, based upon the current status of this country, to fight for it. It makes me feel like a total coward, a puss. I'm broken. Here these men were, being pissed on, figuratively, not literally. And they were willing to do what they did. And now here I sit, just 20 short years removed from a deployment, saying that I wouldn't do it again. And so I think I need to ask myself a few questions. But I think that would be the one thing that I would look at is, where were we? Where are we? Why are we not seeing the picture as clearly as we did at a time when you barely had a color TV? And that is all.
Hey, that's pretty powerful, bro. See, he thinks that he's no good at this final thoughts thing. I think he does better every time. Truth be told. Thank you, bro, for that. My opinion is this. In a time, it's much like Jason said, in a time when we are so polarized and divided, so they say, looking back at people who were unwanted, people who were were persecuted for just being who they were and still had the guts to fight for this place. That's what we're missing. We're missing people that still have the guts to stand up for what's right, no matter what, because right is right. Live by the golden rule, if you want to call it that. Whatever it is, these men, in the words of a good friend of mine, have probably some of the biggest sets of cojones that just about anybody ever has carried around. And they displayed that. When everything was lost, or so it seemed, they kept fighting. They kept sending their messages. They kept doing what they had to do. And so being able to sit at a table with these men, one or all of them, to be quite honest, I would have a litany of questions, but I don't know if I'd be able to really get them all out. I would be listening. I would be doing a lot of listening. Because I don't know that they would need a whole lot of prompting to talk, right? Maybe they would just start telling stories. So at the end of the day, my challenge to you is to check it out. See what it's about. Look them up, watch the videos, read the books, watch the movies, talk to other people that might know something about it, and share the knowledge that you gain. And do not let the legacy of these men die, because this is what our country really was built on. Not McDonald's, not Facebook, not anything like that. It was built on men and women that had decided that they were going to do what's right at all costs. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. If you like the content, please do us a huge favor. Throw us a like and a subscribe. It really helps out the channel and gets us on down the road to be doing a whole lot of other work that we'd like to be doing with this platform that we've been given. So please help us out with that if you would. We really would appreciate it. I want to thank Jason for his time, and I want to thank you for being here. Have a great evening. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.